This is Robb Ryerse. This is the Vote Common Good podcast on a Tuesday, which means we're talking about politics. Sadly, our fearless leader, Doug Padgett, is traveling today. And so you get to listen in to me and producer Dan Deitrich. We're gonna be talking about all sorts of things in the world of politics and trying to make sense of them, and kind of wishing that Donald Trump would just go away. But but we can all dream, right, Dan?
Yeah.
I'm in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and sitting, as Doug always likes to announce his posture. When we begin a podcast, I am sitting in my office in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Dan, where are you in the world today?
Yeah, I am in South Bend, Indiana, also sitting down. I don't have a fancy standing setup. Wish I did, but
right, exactly.
Yeah.
But for those folks out there that are listening in, whether that's live on Facebook right now or Twitter or wherever you're watching. Or listening in on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play or all of those places where podcasts are available. Producer Dan, well, I just like calling you that, Producer Dan. Dan,
that's
better than some
Producer
of your other
Dan.
nicknames. So Dan just, because of the love of all of you, dear listeners, Dan just turned off his air conditioning.
That's true.
So if he starts to sweat, you understand. Speaking of sweating, Dan, can you believe the heat wave in the Pacific Northwest?
Man, it's wild. I've got relatives up there, and they're sweating it out. And it's hard to say that this is just weather as usual,
right?
When we're hitting these sort of highs. So.
Yeah. It's interesting. And Doug likes to make the point that weather is not climate. However, climate impacts weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we're seeing so many dramatic shifts in weather patterns, like that has got to be a canary in the coal mine for us.
Yeah.
It says, listen, something is happening here, and we've got to do something about it. And instead, we're arguing about everything else other than, maybe what are the things that are most important. So, so I think addressing climate change is so critically important. And that's why, the president met this last week with a group of kind of moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats, and trying to get some agreement on a structure for the infrastructure bill, because President Biden is actually able to do something that Donald Trump is not able to do, and that is to move forward with addressing infrastructure. It's a big deal for me here in Arkansas. I don't know if you've heard this, but the bridge between Arkansas and Tennessee that crosses the Mississippi River between West Memphis and Memphis, Tennessee, is currently closed because of a big crack in the bridge.
Yeah.
And, it is, so traffic's being diverted. It is having a significant impact on the economy in Memphis and the economy in Arkansas, and really around the country.
It
truckers.
takes a little while to fix a bridge like that.
Yeah, it really, really does. And this is a bridge that I've crossed several times. And President Trump, whenever he would get into some kind of problem, some kind of scandal, which was, basically weekly, it became kind of a running joke that, like, to try to distract and change the story, to change the narrative. And that famous Don Draper line from Mad Men, if you don't like what they're saying about you, change the conversation. That was the approach that the Trump administration had. And every time they would wheel out, no pun intended, infrastructure week as the solution, that like, hey, this week we're going to handle infrastructure. It's infrastructure week. Just wait until infrastructure week. Became this running joke. In fact, that when Doug and I like went through a top 10 list of most hilarious things from the Trump administration in, I think, our final This Guy's Got to Go podcast that we used to do on the day that Joe Biden was inaugurated president of the United States, Infrastructure Week made the list of most hilarious things from the Trump administration. But what we have here with Joe Biden is actual success when it comes to infrastructure, moving forward with an infrastructure deal, and using this kind of bipartisan moderate group of Republicans and Democrats. And, it's all the usual suspects here. We've got, Susan Collins and Mitt Romney and Joe Manchin and Kristen Simia, and we've got all the usual suspects, and now there's a group of progressives in Congress, the so-called squad, who are saying, wait a minute. What about our concerns, especially related to climate change? Mm-hmm. And are we going to address those in the infrastructure bill? Why are essentially asking the administration, why are you making a deal with Republicans to get this thing passed, and in the process ignoring our concerns? Mm-hmm. And so there's a group of progressives now that are considering holding up the infrastructure bill in Congress because it does not address climate change nearly as aggressively as it needs to. And what a important time and a critical moment to raise that issue, as the western part of the country is baking at this point.
Yeah. Rob, tell me, why do folks feel like the infrastructure bill is the time and place to make pushes toward climate change?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. One is things that are included in the infrastructure bill are things like roads. And, obviously that, has to do with the fossil fuel industry and cars and all of that. And there's the opportunity that, to think about how do we be most efficient and not destroy the environment, just by, steamrolling over everything, paving everything and driving over it. There's also concerns about public transportation and how that can help to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And the infrastructure bill could be used to help address that. And especially things like high-speed rail and those things being a part of the process. Something else that's a part of it is simply the idea of jobs and what types of jobs are going to be created as a result of this. Are they going to be more fossil fuel jobs that end up doing damage to the environment, or are they going to be so-called green jobs that help to spur on? See, we have so many false dichotomies that we're given in our political system, and one of the false dichotomies that we're given is that you have to choose between the environment and the economy. Right. And the reality is that you don't. So there's a number of things. And then when you step beyond that, there's arguments about what else is infrastructure. Yeah. And it seems like, and I think the Republicans have a legitimate critique when they say that, well, Democrats will call anything infrastructure. And I can kind of see both sides of that argument. Yeah. Because there's, like healthcare and
childcare was in there.
Childcare, because you've got to address not just the infrastructure that moves our vehicles around and moves us around in our vehicles, but the infrastructure that supports our economy.
Right, the systems in place that make it possible for people to work. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm a big Mayor Pete fan, living here in South Bend, and now Secretary Pete, Secretary of Transportation, has been great in convincing even Republicans that a lot of this is necessary stuff to to keep our economy moving. I don't know how successful he'll be in when it comes to a vote, but even Republicans seem to be like, well, I kind of like this guy, and so I'm
Yeah.
hopeful that some of it will be included.
Well, here's the reason why an infrastructure bill, is really possible and is a huge opportunity to demonstrate leadership from the Biden administration. You just boil it down to nobody likes traffic, right? And, and if you're able to say, hey, we're going to address this stuff, we're going to make roads and bridges better and safer, and it's going to be a headache when the construction is happening, but once it's over, like you're going to be able to get around better. People are going to be on board with that. They're going to say, oh yeah, that's actually something that the federal government ought to do. And so I think this is one of those bills that I think the president's going to get a big win out of it. I think the idea of bipartisanship is going to get a big win out of it. My concern, I remain concerned that, and again, we're going to have to see what's actually in the bills that actually get passed and then get sent to committee to be reconciled and all of those things. We'll have to see what actually comes out of everything.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that this is an ideal time to address not everything that we need to address related to climate change, but a number of the things that we need to talk about. And this is an opportunity to address those things. And I join with those progressives in Congress questioning, like, is that actually going to happen? Are we going to miss a golden opportunity here?
Mm-hmm. Do you worry that in an effort to include some of those quote unquote more progressive positions on climate change, will that torpedo the end result and just rile up Republicans who are just so anti anything AOC does or says?
Yeah.
Do you worry about that at all?
Yeah, and a little side note, and we'll probably talk about the Trump rally that took place. Did you see the clip from Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying that AOC needs to be locked up? That she called her that little communist, AOC, and listen, Alex is somebody that you got to be real careful about insulting, because the clapbacks are fantastic. and so Alex tweeted, I should say Representative Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, I'm taller than she is, which is just so funny.
And the best Marjorie Taylor could come back with was, well, you're still a commie.
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Goodness. So I think that the real challenge that the Biden administration has is threading this needle. And it's really difficult. They have got to figure out, how do we keep progressives, in line, not in line, but how do we keep progressives from revolting and on board? And at the same time, how do we put together something that's going to, be strong enough to be filibuster proof in the Senate? Because we found that, as we've seen already, that anything the Republicans want to shoot down, they're able to because of the filibuster. And so filibuster proofing this legislation is really important. And so there's going to have to be compromises all around. And that's, the essence of governing, I suppose.
Yeah. So in the article, you've got 3 Republicans in on this meeting, 3 or 4. Do you think Biden has 10 that would sign on to this at this point?
I think I think that's typically a kind of a representative group, and again, infrastructure is one of those things that instinctively everybody says, oh yeah, the government needs to do something about that. Yeah. Like the Trump supporting long haul trucker who has to divert his trip around Memphis, and it's costing him time and money as a result. he wants more money spent on infrastructure.
Right.
You know, like this is one of those things that can get, you know, really broad support. And you know, what's interesting, so many issues, the American people are, you know, there are clear majorities.
Yeah.
I mean, there's issues where there's not, but there are issues where there's clear majorities. And you know, some common sense gun reforms is one of those things that very clear majorities. Expanding healthcare is one of those things that has very clear majorities in both parties, and it is so often it is elected Republican leadership that's out of step with where people are at, and even people within their own party, and end up making this stuff more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of people that make things more difficult than they need to be, you know, when is Donald Trump going to go away? Is Donald Trump going to go away? You know, I had this sense. I had this sense after he was defeated resoundingly by Joe Biden in the 2020 election, when Joe Biden, you know, absolutely destroyed Donald Trump in the popular vote and the Electoral College. Matching what Donald Trump once called the biggest Electoral College victory of all time when he got that same number of electoral votes against Hillary Clinton. I had that sense that, you know, I had President Gerald Ford ringing in my ears of like our long national nightmare is now over. Our long national nightmare is not going away, is it, Dan?
It
like
keeps going.
we just keep waking up. And we wake up, and this story here was the main story on foxnews.com yesterday. Like the lead story on foxnews.com, the headline, the picture. And yeah, some of you are going, wait a minute, you read foxnews.com? Absolutely, I read foxnews.com. Everybody ought to read foxnews.com. I'm just going to wait for the
before
comments.
You do.
Yeah, I'm just going to wait for the comments to come rolling in. But this was the lead story on foxnews.com yesterday, Speaker Trump. And it lays out the scenarios that Doug and I have talked about on this podcast a few times, that there is a more than a whisper campaign that Donald Trump could end up as Speaker of the House. If, and I have made no secret of the fact that I am absolutely terrified about the 2022 midterms. If Republicans are able to take a majority in the Senate, in the House in 2022, which, given history, is not an implausible possibility.
Right.
Donald Trump, and there's could become Speaker of the House. Now, there's two scenarios where this could happen. One is if he were to run for Congress and get elected and then be chosen by his fellow Congress people. That's only happened once that a former president ran for Congress. Do you know this little bit of history, Dan? Do you know who it was?
I'm very curious.
Our sixth president, John Quincy Adams, returned to Congress after serving as president, and
one term as president.
Yeah, I think he was a one-termer. I don't. Come on, Dan. I don't know that much. I just know these little trivia things. You know, there's the problem is that Donald Trump himself lives in a deep blue district. In fact, a district that did not vote for him in 2020. Now, different states have different rules about whether or not you have to live within the district that you are running for to serve as their representative in Congress. An absolutely ridiculous thing, quite frankly. You ought to live in the district that you represent. So there's, the article speculates that Trump could pick a bright red district in Florida and just, run there. Mm-hmm. The other scenario is, and this is a little bit of a loophole, but the Constitution does not specify that the Speaker of the House has to be a member of the House of Representatives. literally anyone could be elected Speaker of the House if they get the 218 vote majority required to be Speaker of the House. So
Is
Donald Trump doesn't have to be a member of the House of Representatives to be elected Speaker of the House.
That's so wild. Is that just like a whoops, we forgot to clarify because it's too obvious that you would have to be a member of Congress to preside over Congress, or is this intentional by the founders? And
I don't know. It's never happened. So, because I think, congressional members just don't want to cede that much power to somebody else.
right.
And typically, the Speaker of the House is someone who has served in the House for a long time and has built up, the networks and the political favors and all of that takes to be chosen for that position. But Donald Trump has proven to be a completely different political character. Now, the challenge you have is that there are no specific rules about this, but tradition has held that you have to have a majority in the House of Representatives to become Speaker of the House. And you have to hit that 218 number where you have, over 50% to be Speaker of the House. If there were a three-way race for Speaker of the House, and someone did not hit that 218 number, what has happened in the past has been multiple ballots until someone gets there, and there's the backroom deals that happen and all of the the politicking that takes place for that to happen. It could be if there are a number of Republicans who would refuse to vote for Donald Trump because they think he fomented an insurrection against the country, and 10 of them voted to impeach him. If there was a block of Republicans who would refuse to vote for him, and so he wasn't able to get to that 218 number, he still could have the most votes, the plurality of votes, but not hitting that 218 threshold. So we could see two traditions fall. One being that you have to hit 218 to be elected Speaker, and two being that you have to be a member of Congress to be elected Speaker. But the prospect of Speaker Trump is just terrifying.
Yeah.
And this is, I got to tell you, when this idea moves from, a couple of folks just, talking about what if scenarios and hypotheticals to the lead story on FoxNews.com, that means it's beginning to pick up momentum, and it will shape the hopes, dreams, and expectations of all sorts of Republican voters, who are the primary consumers of Fox News.
Yeah, and it seems like another case where even if Trump makes his intentions known, he wants to be Speaker, but then doesn't get enough votes, he gets to play the victim again.
Yes.
For another 2 years.
Like he did at his rally. The Trump rally was, I don't know if you caught much of it, Dan, if you watched any of it. But it was, what was really fascinating is there seems to be a bit of a Trump backlash happening, even within Trump's biggest supporters. One of the things that, if you watch videos from folks that were there, and there was all sorts of media that was attending the event and covering the event that took place this weekend, people were leaving early in droves.
Really?
Mid-speech. Now,
I am someone 90 minutes, right? Trump's speech?
Yeah. I am someone who has been to 2 Trump rallies. I was at one in Northwest Arkansas during the Republican primary in 2016. My son and I went and heard the president, or the then candidate, Trump speak in here in Arkansas. And then Doug and I attended as a part of the Vote Common Good tour an event that took place in New Hampshire in early 2020. And I am someone who twice, have left early from a Trump event. Not because I was offended necessarily, because I'm not easily offended. Not because, I was, outraged, but because it got boring. And like literally both times I left because it was like, okay, I've heard enough.
I
This
get
is
it.
boring.
Yeah.
And that was the reaction of many people at the Trump event over the weekend. Even Trump's and I am not a Trump supporter, obviously, but even Trump's supporters were like, okay, this is a little bit boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw one interview with one of the folks who was leaving early, who said they were hoping he would talk about some more radical things than he was.
Oh,
And
wow.
and so asked about what he meant by radical, he was like, the election fraud, and people were hoping for the QAnon Trump, the
Right.
the insurrectionist Trump, the like we're gonna drain the swamp and take down the deep state Trump.
I'm going to be
That
back in office by August, Trump.
Yes, and what they got was the same regurgitation of all of the stuff that we've heard from the former president, twice impeached, utterly disgraced former president, and roundly, astonishingly, really defeated by Joe Biden. And what we heard was just the same old, same old. And
Yeah.
people are like, you know, give us something new or we're out. It was a
Mm-hmm.
really interesting reaction to see that there was a significant percentage of people, and you even saw this on many of the right-wing social media sites. I don't know what if you a great follow on Twitter is a Twitter account called Patriot Takes. It used to be called Parlor Takes, and it's basically someone who is monitoring Parlor and grabbing screenshots and posting them on Twitter. And they now cover, a variety of social media sites like Gab and some of the other ones that where Trump supporters like to hang out. And Patriot Takes was, posting these kinds of responses from all over, people just saying, yeah, this is kind of boring. Like, what Trump was doing was kind of playing the hits, and
Mm-hmm.
it was not nearly as inspiring and as exciting as people were hoping.
I feel like at some point you get tired of losing and continuing to back someone who lost. It's got to be a little bit like embarrassing at some point, right? Like our guy lost. We're still trying to, I don't know,
Yeah.
salvage something. But it
Yep.
does seem like you said, he's trying to change the narrative, move away from anything related to headlines like this. Trump Organization lawyers make last-ditch effort to avoid New York charges because he's got some legal problems, Rob.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And we're going to see from the Southern District of New York, which is a part of the Justice Department. We're also going to see from the Manhattan District Attorney, who's this situation is happening with. The Attorney General of the state of New York, as well as Georgia, are all involved in current, ongoing, active investigations of Donald Trump and his business dealings, and in Georgia, his election. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not pandering. Election interference.
Oh, interference, yeah.
Yeah.
He's calling up the
and
Secretary of State. Let's change a few votes, shall we?
Yeah, come on. And yeah, all of this is got to be really scary. Now, some of the news that I saw today was that, they expect that this is going to be a very narrow indictment of the Trump organization. They don't expect any, high profile people to be named in it. It's unlikely that this particular investigation is going to lead to Donald Trump being indicted. And really all we can hope for is is that sometime between now and 2024 that Donald Trump gets convicted of a felony, because that will make him ineligible. And even the smallest felony, that will make him ineligible to serve as president of the United States, and he won't be able to run again in 2024. So I don't have a lot of this is good. It's good that the Trump organization is being held accountable for their malfeasance. I don't think that this particular case is the silver bullet. I think what the state of New York is doing, and the Southern District of New York, which is the U.S. Attorney as part of the Justice Department, I think those are the cases to watch. This one, I don't have nearly as much kind of oomph for that I do with some of the other cases.
Gotcha. How likely do you think it is that one of these investigations sticks and there's a felony charge?
Yeah, I hope it happens. I think I would be surprised if it does.
Yeah.
And just it's just I don't know. I just think I would be surprised if it does. But if it did, it would have a massive impact on the 2024 presidential race, which apparently has already begun.
It's already underway.
Yeah, it is. I gotta tell you, Dan, I'm someone who's real involved in political campaigns and involved in elections, and these cycles are getting longer and longer and longer, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good for the country that we have endless campaigning. I think that I just think it's bad. I just think it's not healthy for our democracy. And I don't know, exactly what to do about it. It would be interesting to, in the same way that we limit the money that can be donated to campaigns, it would be really interesting to limit how campaigns spend their money and when they can spend their money. If we were to limit that to, 3 months before a primary, and then 3 months before the general election, that would have a dramatic impact, I think, on our politics. But these are other thoughts. But that's not the case now. So Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Tom Cotton, Mike Pompeo, and a whole bunch of other Republicans.
Putting out some feelers, yeah.
Yeah, what's the name of the governor from North Dakota?
Gosh.
She's somebody to watch. She's someone to kind of keep your eye on. They're putting out some feelers, beginning the work of building a network, meeting folks in New Hampshire and Iowa, going around the country trying to get donors lined up behind them as opposed to their opponents. And it looks like 2024 is upon us.
Oh man. Do you think Pence has a chance? I just keep hearing stories of him just getting booed off the stage.
No. Mike Pence is going to end up like Dan Quayle, as he is going to overestimate his appeal and will be an also ran in the 2024 election. And then we'll probably go away for him, for us never to hear from him again.
Yeah. Well,
that
might be a best case scenario for all of us.
Exactly. This is not a problem.
I feel zero sympathy for a guy that hitched his wagon to the Trump train and then was betrayed by Trump in the most literal, like, they set up a gallows for Mike Pence during the insurrection, and Trump was like, "Yeah, go get him, boys."
Yeah, chanted about how they wanted to hang him.
Yeah,
I highlight this story simply because it's a little bit amusing that the race has already started. The reality is that the race hasn't started, and it is entirely too soon to begin handicapping this, thinking about who's going to win, who could win, until we were doing that, in in 2016, and then Donald Trump, came down the escalator in Trump Tower and turned the whole thing on its head. And even when that happened, we were, I was one of those really unfortunate people that was saying, I would say to people, it's like, I like Donald Trump running for president because it was amusing as hell, but I don't want Donald Trump to be president. And now I don't even like the thought of Donald Trump running for president. It just seems so ridiculous of a possibility. Mm-hmm. And there were those warning us that it could happen, and we were completely wrong. They were completely right. And so I think it feels entirely too soon to even begin to wonder about how all this is going to play out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much can happen between now and then. So
absolutely. And that does not mean that people are not continuing to plan and to work towards, having some political impact. One of the most interesting stories I have read in a very long time was a New York Times article yesterday about Republican efforts to infiltrate Democratic and progressive organizations, spies, essentially, working their way into Democratic Party apparatus and progressive organizational apparatus for the purpose of learning, gaining information, and then, possibly sabotaging the work that's being done. Dan, this is something out of like a movie, but it was actually happening. There's some connections with Project Veritas, which is this ridiculous news organization, which does the like gotcha journalism thing, and often will send in people pretending to be somebody different, for the purpose of catching somebody and taping somebody on, getting somebody on film saying something stupid or doing something stupid. And so apparently there's some folks that kind of outgrew the Project Veritas and decided, like, let's take this to the next level. A gentleman who was a part of MI6 in England, a real life James Bond kind of guy, hosted a number of trainings working with folks, a wealthy heiress in Wyoming funding all of it. I mean, this is a movie playing out here, like an oil baroness funding all of this. Wow. Most of it was happening in Wyoming, which is really interesting because, Wyoming is a very bright red state. Like, it seems like if you're going to try to infiltrate Democratic Party apparatus and organizations, you might pick a bluer area than Wyoming. Right. But this couple that were involved in this ended up at one of the Democratic presidential debates. They ended up at key fundraising events. They ended up having insider information about the donation and strategic plans of a progressive organization in Wyoming, which was planning on supporting moderate Republicans. This progressive organization kind of realizing that progressives couldn't win in Wyoming at that point, and so they were going to support moderate Republicans through media campaigns, and these Republican operatives were able to learn that. So the question I've got is this a one-off, or is this a new stage of what we're going to see in American politics that includes spy tactics and sabotage?
Oh, man. Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but this has been my long game with Vote Common Good all along. Infiltrate and destroy.
Excellent. Yeah. It's a really interesting read. It's really fascinating. And maybe the most fascinating thing is kind of at the At the end of the story, the couple just kind of disappears. They fall off the face of the earth. They just ghost everybody that they had
weird.
these relationships with. Yeah.
Very suspicious. It's just
Yeah.
another one of those, like, maybe there's nothing illegal about this if you're just a part of an organization. There's no legally binding contract and not. I don't know what the situation is, but it's still like, I don't know. The Republican Party that I grew up in was all about character, ethics, like doing the right thing,
Honor and morality.
yeah. And so it's just like another example of how far the party has moved away from those values.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we will keep shining the light on that here as a part of the Vote Common Good podcast on when we talk about politics on Tuesdays. Yeah, Dan, it's so important that we be aware of what's going on and think critically about this stuff. Tomorrow is Faith Day with the Common Good podcast, so that will be happening tomorrow with some really amazing faith leaders, and then we'll continue on through the rest of the week. We've got so much going on. We'd love for you to be a part of it, particularly the We the People bike ride that is taking place on the southern border. Do you want to talk about that, Dan? Because you seem to be on the screen instead of me.
I seem
Go
to
for it.
Put my face up here instead of yours. But we're riding bicycles all the way coast to coast, and we'd love for you to join us. WeThePeopleRide.org. You don't have to do the whole thing, which is good news for me. You can do a segment, you can do a week, you can do a day, or you can put together a ride in your own community. So a lot of options, but check out WeThePeopleRide.org and get involved with us. We're trying to raise awareness around immigration, conditions at the border, and imagine a better way forward as a nation. So
yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah, a common good border policy. Yeah. And as Doug likes to say, while you're there, don't miss the donate button.
Yep.
Well, Dan, it was great chatting with you today. Will Doug be back tomorrow for everybody? Or
he will be back Thursday. So tomorrow with our faith leaders, we've got a great panel and a guest lined up. It's going to be good stuff.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Tuesday.
See ya.